Hello and welcome to TVB News. Russian President Vladimir Putin has made his first visit to areas occupied by his armed forces since the invasion of Ukraine 13 months ago. Putin drove around the Donetsk city of Mariupol, where last year outgunned Ukrainian troops fought for 3 months before Russian forces eventually took over. Meanwhile, Ukraine and Russia have extended their deal to allow the passage of grain shipments from the Black Sea. Nazvi Karim reports.
Vladimir Putin firmly at the wheel, unruffled by events out of his control. A day after the International Criminal Court issued a warrant for his arrest on war crimes charges, the Russian president visited the city of Mariupol in Donetsk, driving around several districts and talking to residents. It's his first visit to Russian-occupied territory since the start of the war in February last year. He flew to Mariupol by helicopter after visiting Crimea on the 9th anniversary of Russia's annexation of the peninsula in 2014. In Crimea, he visited a new children's center in Sevastopol, in the historical and archaeological museum reserve Tariq Hersaniz. After Mariupol, Putin traveled to Rostov-on-Don in southern Russia for meetings with top military commanders. The ICC issued the arrest warrant for Putin on charges that Moscow illegally abducted children in occupied areas and then sent them to Russia. Putin's spokesman described the ICC's move as null and void, with neither Russia nor countries such as the United States recognizing the court as a legal entity. On the battlefront, local officials say a residential building in Kharkiv, Donetsk, was completely destroyed by shelling, though no casualties were reported. This as the battle for Bakhmut, also in Donetsk, rages on, with Ukrainian armed forces saying they continue to repel Russian attacks while inflicting heavy losses. Meanwhile, Ukraine and Russia have agreed to extend the deal allowing the export of grain from Black Sea ports. After days of talks brokered by Turkey, the agreement was extended by 60 days, half of what Ukraine requested, with Russia saying any further extension would depend on the lifting of some Western economic sanctions on Moscow. The United Nations said since the deal was first signed in July, 25 million tons of grain and foodstuff from the region were delivered, helping to bring down prices and stabilize markets. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Meantime, the U.S. is trying to discourage Honduras from following through on its plan to switch diplomatic ties from Taipei to Beijing. According to Reuters, Washington hopes there could be a U-turn as a formal agreement has yet to be finalized. U.S. officials said many countries which have made the shift have not reaped the economic benefits they were hoping for. The diplomatic pressure comes after Honduran President Xiomara Castro said on Tuesday her country would establish formal ties with Beijing. She had made such as a pledge during her presidential campaign in 2021. If Honduras' switch to Beijing is formalized, Taiwan will have just 13 diplomatic allies. The U.S. Department of Transportation has reportedly drafted an order that would ban Chinese carriers from flying passengers to America if they go through Russian airspace. Since the Russia-Ukraine war broke out early last year, most Western carriers have been banned from using Russian airspace. This means carriers have to make lengthy detours and add extra miles en route to Asia. However, most Asian and Middle Eastern-based rivals are still authorized to use Russia's airspace. U.S. operators said such a move has put them at a competitive disadvantage, costing them $2 billion a year. U.S. media reports said American senators and the airline industry are now lobbying for a ban on airlines willing to do business with Russia or forcing them to employ the same routes as their U.S. counterparts. In France, another night of unrest Saturday on the streets of Paris and beyond. This as protests against President Emmanuel Macron's plan to raise the country's retirement age from 62 to 64 persist. Police in Paris used a water cannon against protesters after clashes broke out between demonstrators and officers. And police in riot gear threw gas canisters towards a gathered crowd. Crippling strikes have left garbage building up on the streets of the French capital. The growing unrest and strikes have left President Macron facing one of the gravest challenges to his authority since taking office. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan has had arrest warrants against him canceled after he complied with an order to appear in court in Islamabad. Khan is facing a spate of legal challenges, including charges that he unlawfully sold state gifts given to him by foreign dignitaries while in office from 2018 to 2022. Khan was allowed to sign his presents from his car, which had reached the judicial complex, but clashes between his supporters and police prevented him from leaving the vehicle. In his home city of Lahore, police stormed his residence and arrested 61 people on Saturday. Police said they acted to remove a barricade erected by members of Khan's political party and his supporters. They say the crowd blocked lanes around Khan's residence with concrete blocks, fallen trees, tents, and a parked truck. The government is currently seeking to amend the Legal Practitioners Ordinance. The move would allow the chief executive to decide whether an overseas lawyer can participate in a national security case in Hong Kong. Deputy Secretary for Justice Horace Chung said the changes are partly aimed at preventing litigants from repeatedly switching foreign lawyers and effectively delaying the judicial process. Timothy Lee tells us more.
In one of the city's largest national security trials, the case of Nix Digital founder Jimmy Lai, the Court of Final Appeal gave permission to the hiring of British lawyer Tim Owen as Lai's defense counsel. Later, an interpretation of the national security law by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress led to the government's decision to amend the Legal Practitioners Ordinance. This means that any overseas lawyer that might take part in a national security case in the city could only do so with the approval of the chief executive. Part of the latest proposed amendment is that the litigant must get the chief executive's permission before he or she can ask the court to seek a certificate from the CE for the overseas lawyers to take part in national security cases. The move was criticized by the Law Society of Hong Kong as being inefficient, while others call it a blanket ban on foreign lawyers in the city. Speaking on a TVB program, Deputy Secretary for Justice Horace Chung said the proposed amendment will not only save time for legal procedures and prevent those with ill intent to exploit the judicial system, but will continue to give room for litigants to hire overseas lawyers.
We find out that in the major common law jurisdiction overseas, actually they have no such admission scheme for overseas lawyer to appear before the court in foreign countries. So actually the admission scheme in Hong Kong is quite unique. And even after the amendments to the Legal Practitioner Ordinance, you can see that we still maintain the mechanism to allow the litigation parties to apply for leave in the court to invite foreign lawyers to practice in Hong Kong. I think that after the amendments to the Legal Practitioner Ordinance, one, it can maintain our admission scheme. And the other one is that we will have a mechanism to safeguard the national security.
Chung stressed that the government is not looking to bar non-local lawyers from practicing in the city. Regarding foreign lawyers who have already been admitted prior to the amendment, he said their arrival will also depend on whether they fulfill other legal requirements in the SAR. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Innovation and Technology Secretary Sun Dong said the city will step up collaboration with the mainland and facilitate exchanges of scientific research data. Earlier, the tech chief signed an agreement in Beijing that aims to speed up the SAR's development into an international innovation and tech hub. Sun said the mainland will share its scientific research data with Hong Kong and beef up cooperation in science and technology. He said he hopes the city will soon be able to access the China Scientific and Technological Achievements database. More discussions are on the way as to how the shared data could be managed. Welcome back. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has claimed that his arrest is imminent and issued an extraordinary call for his supporters to protest. This as a New York grand jury investigates a 2016 hush money payment to a woman who alleged sexual encounters with him. Trump is suspected of falsifying business records to conceal such payments as legitimate payments to a lawyer before elections. More from NBC News.
Donald Trump tonight predicting his own arrest next Tuesday, calling on his millions of followers to protest on his behalf and, quote, take our nation back in the face of what could be an historic first, the indictment of a former president. Mr. Trump making his claim on social media, citing what he called, quote, illegal leaks from a highly political Manhattan district attorney, repeating that call to action in a later post, writing, protest, protest, protest. Republicans quickly rallying to his defense.
It reeks of the kind of political prosecution that we endured back in the days of the Russia hoax.
The House Speaker going even further, tweeting that he was directing relevant committees to investigate what he called the pursuit of, quote, political vengeance against the former president. And while Mr. Trump did not call for violent action today, Democrats were quick to condemn his rhetoric.
He first incited violence on January 6th to prevent his removal from power. And now he's attempting to incite political violence to prevent his prosecution.
NBC News was first to report Friday that law enforcement officials in New York are preparing for the possibility of Mr. Trump's indictment and arrest as soon as the coming week.
If the former president were to be indicted, he likely won't be going through the front doors of the courthouse here in Lower Manhattan. Instead, he'll likely enter through the district attorney's office with media and onlookers crowding in on both sides.
He will have to go through the normal processing that includes fingerprinting and having photographs taken.
The Manhattan DA's case centers on whether then-candidate Trump in 2016 directed his attorney, Michael Cohen, to pay off adult film star Stormy Daniels, who claimed they had an affair a decade prior. Trump allies tonight arguing that a New York City indictment would only help catapult him back to the White House.
The prosecutor in New York has done more to help Donald Trump get elected president than any single person in America today.
In other news, North Korea today fired a short-range ballistic missile towards the sea off the east coast of the Korean peninsula. This is the latest in a barrage of weapons tests from the nuclear-armed state. Japan's State Minister of Defense Toshiro Ino told reporters that the missile flew 800 kilometers at a maximum height of around 50 kilometers before splashing down outside Japanese waters. He said the actions of North Korea are a threat to peace and security of Japan and the region, as well as the international community. Back here at home, an elderly man died after a fight with another resident at a care home in Tai Kok Tsui. Police have arrested a 75-year-old man in connection with the case. The violence broke out at an elderly care home on Ivy Street. Police received reports about two residents attacking each other at around 9 p.m. Friday, during which a 74-year-old man fell to the ground. He did not appear to have suffered any superficial wounds and was conscious upon arriving at Kwanghwa Hospital. However, he had died at around 10 o'clock the following morning. An autopsy will be carried out to determine the cause of death, and police have detained the other man involved in the fight. Despite a rebound in mainland visitor numbers, it's a different story for tour groups, according to mainland travel agencies. Another industry representative said it might take some time before service capacity in Hong Kong's tourism sector fully recovers. Jackie Lin reports.
More than a month after the border reopened between Hong Kong and the mainland, tourist spots around town have seen a return of crowds. Last month, nearly 1.5 million travelers visited Hong Kong. More than 1.1 million of them came from up north. That marked the first time visitor figures from the mainland had topped 1 million over the past 3 years. Latest data from the Immigration Department also showed the average daily number of mainland visitors surged from around 20,000 to 60,000 during weekdays after the border reopened early last month, with an even more significant upswing over the weekends. But a different story in the statistics of tour groups from the mainland. The Travel Industry Authority received around 1,840 registrations for such tours from the mainland since February 6 until last Monday. A mainland travel agency said many visitors to Hong Kong prefer planning their own trips, and the relatively higher hotel rates have also put off many mainlanders wishing to travel here. Timothy Choi, executive director of the Hong Kong Tourism Association, said the sluggish return of tour groups might be because Hong Kong's tourism sector has not fully recovered. This as travel agencies have yet to rehire staff and tour guides who left the industry during the past 3 years. A similar situation for coach drivers. Choi expects the number of tour groups to return to pre-pandemic levels around the end of this year. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
New World First Bus will be merged into City Bus starting July this year. To commemorate and remember this brand of over 25 years, New World First Bus plans to organize a series of events, including an exhibition of retired buses. Veronica Lin tells us more.
This bus that retired 5 years ago was once hailed as one of New World First Bus's founding heroes. So what's so special about these so-called super Olympians? The low platforms made it easy to access for wheelchair users. Whilst nowadays that may seem ordinary, it was a brand new design 2 decades ago. The seats, equipped with river blue armrests, still retain the original look from its early days. A bus driver for over 4 decades, New World First Bus driver Wang Chi-chai says he feels nostalgic sitting in the driver's seat. Wang said the older models had less armrests and the corridors were much narrower. Moreover, the bus stopping bells were so loud that they would scare the drivers. Unlike new models, there were individual seats that allowed passengers sitting opposite each other to chat face to face, creating a relaxed atmosphere. When New World First Bus was established in 1998, there were more than 80 I-Line bus lines, which later expanded to Chung Kung O, West Kowloon, and so on. Over the years, New World First Bus and City Bus went from being competitors to sister companies, as its parent company, Bravo Transport Services Limited, received approval from Chief Executive John Lee to merge the two companies. That all becomes history in 4 months as numerous retired buses are being renovated to create photo opportunities for the public. 4 buses that are currently in use will also be spray painted into replicas, recreating the iconic wavy patterns found on older models. This New World First Bus driver couldn't hide his excitement, saying that it's like an old friend you haven't seen in decades suddenly reappears. 2 of the replicas will follow the 694 S line starting on Monday. It runs to and from Tugeng Lane and Chai Wan via the Chung Kung O Lam Tin Tunnel. It's also the newest bus line from the company. Veronica Lin, TVB News.
That's the news. Have a good evening.